focused on a different topic. And after some discussions with Aaron, we realized that maybe something that could deliver a little bit of value to you as you move forward in your business is really sinking our teeth into, or starting to work our way through, the importance of an effective client engagement process. Now, if you've worked with any other companies over the years, and my understanding is everybody here has access to a lot of different companies, this has been a topic of conversation across the board. I think a lot of companies at the moment are really starting to figure out how to engage their clients better, because with the impact of COVID and education and online ability, I think right now we're starting to see clients act a little bit differently. They're demanding a lot more from us, and frankly, I'm a client as well, so my expectations are very, very high when it comes to engaging with either my advisor or any type of environment, to be honest with you. We want things at our fingertips, and we want people to look after us. And I always jokingly say this to my advisor. I say, as far as I'm concerned, I'm your only client. So I think that's the common theme across the board, honestly. And we really have to start thinking about how we're engaging our clients on a regular basis. So the key to an effective process here is ensuring that you understand the importance of each step and how each of those steps can impact the relationship that you have with your client. So we also have to start thinking about some of the tools that we have available to us throughout this process. And, coming from the Sun Life world, we had lots of tools, touted as industry standard for a lot of these types of tools that we could use from the very beginning of the process all the way through the process and beyond, to be honest with you. But we had some challenges, and some of the challenges were getting some uptick using these tools. And there were lots of reasons as to why people didn't want to use the tools. Now, if I say tools once more, I might drive myself a little crazy. Having said that, I'm going to talk about these tools a little bit later, and I really want to get an understanding of what you're using on a regular basis as well. So having said that, the more we engage with our clients and the more we listen to them will allow us to have a greater impact on what this relationship really does look like going forward. And to touch on the idea of value, which we talked about in last week's session, value is pulled from a process like this, to be honest. We try really, really hard to give the clients as much value as we possibly can. But the reality is they're going to choose where they decide that value fits. So it could be from the moment you call them and start talking about who you are, the company you represent, and the types of services and things that you offer. It could be at the moment when you make a recommendation and begin to implement the plan that the client has agreed upon. So really, we don't know when that value is going to happen. If we follow a process like this, that's really, really integrated. It's very well-rounded, to be honest with you. In a lot of cases, companies have very well-rounded engagement processes. It's just a matter of how we begin to execute on each of those steps. So what we're going to do is, and you can kind of see it hidden in the forest here, believe it or not, that's deliberate. So, it's in the background here so we can start thinking about what some of these steps might be. Having said this is not a commercial for Pine Tree's engagement process. Frankly, I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm not interested in selling you anything, but I am interested in opening your mind a little bit. The expression is, I can't see the forest for the trees. That happens when it comes to the client engagement process, and the impacts that we can have, as I mentioned before, can be astronomical. But they can also disappear quite quickly. So we really have to define each of these steps and talk about how they will impact the relationship that you have with your client. As we move through, feel free to mute and unmute as you want. This session is about you, and I'm hoping that I do get some interaction here as well. So now to the most important part. I'm just kidding. Uh, the introduction of the speaker. It's always nice to know who you're talking to and sort of, where the credibility of this person came from, aside from friendships. And, the reality is Aaron and I did work together for quite some time at Sun, and we had a lot of interaction when it came to the overall process and working with advisors and leaders throughout the company. So as you can see, I've been around this industry specifically for about 15 years, but I've been a coach and a leader outside of this industry for about 20. I started fairly early. I know I look incredibly old at the moment, but that's mainly because of stress and all of my gray hair. So the reality is, though, I've been working with people for a really long time, and that's what I pride myself on as a coach. I really want to help people get better at what they're trying to do. The goals that you set are about you and really how you want to execute inside of your business. Having said that, I started my career at Staples, the Business Depot, as it was called back in those days, and I was just an associate running around the hall, the aisles there, helping people decide which pens they wanted. And if you've ever been in a Staples, pens were my specialty, believe it or not, because it was the biggest challenge. There were thousands of them, and I had to figure out how we could figure out if a client came through the door, what specific pen they were going to look for, whether it was the one that wrote upside down because it came from space, or if it was one that they could keep and replace the cartridge in. Now, I'm telling you that for a very specific reason. That's when I began to think about the client engagement process. Now, at that time, we called it the sales cycle, which you've probably heard as well. It's from the very beginning, the time where we meet a client, all the way through to the time that we walk into the cash register and send them out the door and hope and keep our fingers crossed that they're actually going to come back and buy another pen from us. I then went to Sun Life, where I was an advisor, I was a manager, I was a regional manager, I was a trainer. I helped develop a lot of programs for new and developing advisors, as well as the leadership development program that people could implement in the field. My final role with them was a senior consultant, where I really started to look at the end-to-end process for advisors and managers and make sure that everything we were implementing actually made sense for them. I then went on and I had my own company, which was an engineering firm. That was an international company that we had built out over the course of 3 years. That's a long story, so I'm not going to get into it, but I was the director there, and I became a partner and VP of business development. Then in December, I decided to launch Pine Tree, but I didn't actually launch it until February, because I took the first couple of months to really figure out if the market was ready for some of the things that I was interested in talking about. And not only that, but I needed clients, because clients pay the way. And in order for my company to exist, I needed to have some clients backing me. So I took a few months to do that. And luckily, I ran into some really, really amazing people inside of my network, and we were able to launch Pine Tree officially in February. Now, on to the person in the left-hand side of my screen at the very top. His name is Kevin Laux, and Kevin and I are starting to work together again. We were in the Sun Life world together, where I met Kevin originally because he was a regional vice president with Sun Life, running one of Canada's largest regions. He's been all over the place. Within the country, working with Sun. He's got a very, very extensive background, which I'm not going to get into today, but I'm hoping we can continue building this relationship, and I'll have Kevin come on a little bit later if we do other sessions like this, and have him run some of the areas that we're looking at. The reason he's here today is because now we are officially working together, and he is what we refer to as our Vice President of Business Development. So we've got so much demand going on right now for coaching and development, leadership and personal development, that I needed a little bit of help, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Kevin. Also, it took me a couple of months to, I like to say, convince him to come on board, but I think we were on the same page right from the very beginning. So, Kevin, if you want to jump in at any point throughout the presentation, feel free to do so. Everyone has the option of jumping in, as I mentioned, and just muting and unmuting. So thanks for being here.
Will, I'll just say thanks for the intro, and there certainly wasn't too much convincing involved. We go way back, and we've always had a great relationship. So I know your abilities and your capabilities, and all the hard work, effort, and energy that you have. So it's really a pleasure to be part of Pine Tree and to work again with you and to work firsthand with you as well. So thanks for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone.
Perfect. All right, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide here, if my computer decides to do so. So 1 second. All right, so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at what we refer to as the client engagement cycle or client engagement process. Now, you likely have a process like this already. So the question I will pose to the group is, do you actually have a process that is formalized in this way? Now, don't everyone unmute at once, because if we unmute at once, we may have some overlap here. So just one at a time if you could.
I do, for sure.
Perfect. Great. So we have one person. So, and that was Sean. Was that you who came up there? Perfect. Can you tell me a little bit about it, Sean, just on a high level?
Yeah, so I struggled with this when I first started, and I always identified that that was a necessity. And then there was a period of time where I got away from that more on sort of an order taking basis, which I wanted to migrate more back onto the planning side. And so then it's just been a whole commitment to doing that. So I have a shortened meeting process, and then I have a full length meeting process that I go through with people. So it's almost identified exactly as you do. It's an initial contact, it's a discovery meeting, and it follows that process. It's a 2 or 3 meeting process to get all the data input. And I do that partially just because of a buy-in on the client. If the client's not going to commit that kind of time, then really I'm taking an order at the end of the day. And if we're just going to take an order, hurry up and give me the order and I'll sell it to you. But other than that, I'm moving on. I found it just wasn't delivering. It wasn't delivering the type of clients that I wanted per se on the order base. Now, nothing wrong with the order base. You can do well taking orders, but it's a hard repetition cycle, and I don't want to be in that cycle. I want to be in the advice business, which I've always been in the advice business, but I want to be identified in the advice business. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, actually, you've touched on a lot of really great points here. And these are things that are challenges for a lot of different advisors, no matter the tenure. I've had people who are 5 minutes in the business versus 30 years in the business and really have run into the same type of thing. So you are up against a couple of factors, and one of them may be you have an immediate need that you need to take care of for this client. And that's, I believe, what you refer to as being the order taker. I mean, the reality is sometimes clients know specifically what they're looking for. Now, it may not be exactly what you would recommend, but at the end of the day, there is a basis of what the recommendation is. The other piece is having a shortened process or a longer process, depending on who you're speaking to. Now, I totally agree with that. At the end of the day, when I was an advisor in the very beginning, I was what they would call the one-time closer. You would go in, you would talk to the client, you would close the deal, and you would move on. But that didn't last a long time, because I found that I was replacing these relationships, as I'd like to refer to them, quite quickly. So it has a major impact on the persistency of the block of business, whether or not people stay with you, or whether or not they refer to you, or whether or not they decide to actually stay with you long term. So but you're absolutely right. You have to be able to decide early on what this relationship is going to look like. Now, in some cases, we have no idea how long this person will actually stay with us. And if they're a client who's focused specifically on price, they could leave tomorrow if the price is different or better somewhere else. You know as well as I do, in this industry, there is quite a lot of turnover. The industry standard for retention, when we were looking at numbers in the US, was incredibly low. It was between like 8 and 12%, which was absolutely shocking, because when we were at Sun, we used to tote the idea that our retention rate was one of the best in the industry. And it was, but frankly, it was really low as well. So when we really start thinking about the amount of turnover, that increases the probability of the clients you're working with to find somebody else as well, depending on the relationship that they currently have with that person. So there is a caveat here, or a catch, when it comes to a proper client engagement process. I like to think about the idea of compounding these appointments. Now, to touch on what you said a little bit earlier, Sean, it's if if I need to be an order taker, I can be an order taker. But the reality is I want to move into the advice-based business. Now, if you want to do that, you have to be able to compound these appointment types inside of your weekly calendar. So what does that actually mean? Well, you need to have a certain amount of people that you're contacting on a regular basis built into your calendar. And whether or not that's a call night or a call day or specific times that you block into your calendar to make those phone calls. You also need to have a certain number of discovery meetings, and I'm going to start getting into all of these steps, but the reality is you need to be able to look at your calendar on a weekly basis and decide which of the appointments that you have in there fit each of the pieces of this engagement process. If you can do that, you will always have people in your calendar that fit into all of the most important parts of this cycle from the sales perspective, which is providing a solution, closing, and having ongoing support so that you can gain things like referral-based business or ongoing relationships and more robust or holistic type planning that you're going to have with these clients. So that's going to make a little bit more sense as we continue to work our way through, but keep in mind the idea of compounding. So just my final example before I move on, if you have a certain number of discovery meetings every week, that means out of that number, you will increase the probability of having a couple of more fact finds as you move your way through the remainder of next week. So I'm going to get into that a little bit as well. But let me just define each of these pieces. So number one, we have at the very top is contact. So these are the initial steps taken to engage a client or potential client or prospect. Okay, so this is the basic stuff, picking up the phone, sending an email, doing everything you can in order to contact them for the very first time. Then we have what I refer to as the discovery process or discovery step. That's the qualification process or interview. This is a general overview of what's important to that person, that specific person you're dealing with. So at this point, you're asking questions to uncover the true need. But most importantly, you're trying to uncover what they actually want. So there's a big difference between what their need is and what their want is. So the next step, identify opportunities. That's the fact-finding process. Everyone's been through this, whether you do it on paper, whether you do it in a booklet, whether you do it on a napkin, which hopefully you don't, or you do it in a computer. Now, we get lots of pushback at this stage because people like to call themselves, paper people. I'm someone who likes to put it on paper. When I put it on paper, it's more relationship based. It's meaningful when I'm sitting in front of the person and we're writing it down together. Well, I have a little bit of an argument for that as we move forward. So I'm not here to convince you, but I'm here to open your mind to certain opportunities that you may have. So at that stage, you're talking, like I said, you're talking about paper, you're talking about software, whatever you really use, to be honest with you, that makes you comfortable and also makes the client comfortable. Then we have providing a solution or provide solution. This is the recommendation stage. All the info gathered from the discovery and the identifying opportunities steps come together here to make a recommendation that makes sense for the client. The close, the most exciting piece, right? This is the most exciting piece where you either have an ongoing relationship with someone, or they say, no, they're not interested in you. They're looking to date somebody else for a little longer so that they can figure out really what's going on here. So this is the ask, and there are a billion books about the ask, right? And frankly, all you need to do is ask. I think there you go. If you want to write a book, you can make one page and put it out on Amazon, and a lot of people will buy this book because all you need to do is ask. This is where you ask the client to take the next step and implement the solution or the recommendation that you've made. Ongoing support. There's a lot of attention being put on ongoing support. Sun is one example, but a lot of other companies around the industry are really starting to figure out what this looks like. COVID, again, put a spotlight on ongoing support to really start figuring out how we are working with the client or continuing to work with the client beyond the sale. So this is the ongoing relationship building process to engage the client after the sale. This ensures the advisor knows about all of the changes that may happen over time with a client, and also really getting a firm understanding of how the client is adjusting or working with the plan that you've put in place with them. Any questions before we go to the next step? I'm looking at the time. We have 30 more minutes approximately. We will get through this, no problem, but just want to make sure we stop for some questions. Nope, we're good. Okay, cool. Comments?
I think I can just say, well, from, not just my experience at Sun Life, but certainly a big part of it there, because so much of the work that we did do was with new and developing advisors. But I see it today too. And, at Equitable, we're in the larger case market quite a bit. And we have a lot of conversations about this because we'll see cases come to the table. And the advisor has possibly gone through some of these steps, but their data gathering process, could be expanded in terms of really understanding, what matters to the client, what's important to the client, what are they trying to achieve via this, versus just going straight to a product solution. And so, as you're working with these clients, I think I said it in my video. If I didn't, I talk about, like Phil M. Jones talks about the idea of questions create conversations, and conversations deepen relationships. And I think it's increasingly important that we really dig deep with those clients to understand the meaning behind the solutions that we're going to be presenting, because then it makes the close so much easier. But then that ongoing support piece is really just a conversation of where we're at, and here's why we did what we did. And when we're talking about our reason why letter, we can identify, because client, you told me that charity is really important to you as a part of your legacy, we implemented this solution. But what I find often is those pieces of the story are missing when we're working on some of these larger cases. So it's more just an observation of, clients, and you're going to have the one-off client that comes in, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do. My friend did it, I want to do it, so it might be more transactional, and, those cases are a win because they're maybe not as much work and you're still getting the same result. But I think increasingly, like Abe Taves talks about the advice journey, you got to earn the right to take the client on the advice journey. And part of that process is really about that engagement of getting to know them and understanding what's really going to be important to them. I think everything I've been reading lately really is focusing on that. And I kind of always go back to, we've been giving it lip service for a long time, but this environment has had people take a step back and kind of think, what am I getting from this relationship? And what does my advisor really understand about me and what I want? And there's a lot of data and articles out there suggesting that the consumer of the future is going to be a little more demanding for us all. So some things to think about in your process. How can I fine tune and improve maybe some of the questions I'm asking, or add questions that I'm asking? So,
yeah. Exactly. And I'm going to touch a little bit on the power of asking open-ended questions and how it relates to overcoming objections, because I think a lot of times when we run up against some of the things that Aaron was talking about, we tend to move on a little quicker than we should. Depends again on tenure and what you're offering to the client, and whether or not you've been able to establish the beginning portions of that relationship. But absolutely, the client wants more today, and we have to be willing to give a little bit more. Now, having said that, it means that our process may be a little bit longer than it used to be. But again, to go back to what Aaron said, and closely relate to what Sean said as well, we will run into clients who are transactionally based, who don't necessarily want to go through the entire process. Now, having said that, how can we actually figure that out? Because if we both outline expectations in the very beginning, we're going to know how this is going to go going forward. Now, we also will increase our probability of having the client come back to us if they have more questions, even if it is a transactional type business. It could mean that, if you outline it properly, they may come back to you for another product or something that's, a little bit different than what you had initially. So let's move right on to contact. Now, again, as I mentioned, these are the initial steps taken to engage a client or potential prospect. What's important here? I know, it's an amazing question. What is important? This is incredibly, this allows us to sort of, we have to start thinking outside the box here, because the reality is you can say, Will, like what's important, honestly? What's important is being able to actually get in contact with that person, having them pick up the phone. If they picked up the phone, all would be great. That's one of the biggest challenges we're running into right now, actually, with the clients we're working with. One of the biggest challenges is the clients aren't picking up the phone because we're not necessarily in the office anymore, and we're being forced to use our cell phones, and our names are on our cell phones, and we work for an advisor, so that person's a little reluctant to answer the phone. There's lots of challenges around phone. But what I really want us to start thinking about here is truly what is important when it comes to contact. Let's say they do open or pick up the phone. So some of the things here are, the importance is around what you say and how you say it. You've probably heard this before, the power of the introduction. What I used to say when I was an advisor was, I'm in the business of helping people protect what's most important to them. Now, I'm going to use Aaron's name as an example here. Aaron, we have not had an opportunity to sit down and go through the things that are important to you. So I have no idea what it is that's important to you, and I'm interested to find out. Those are the words I used to use because I hated talking about product and I hated talking about the importance of features and benefits. Because features and benefits don't matter at this point in the game. Right now, what you're trying to do is establish the groundwork for a potential relationship going forward. We don't know what that's going to look like. So we have to work our way through these deliberate steps to make sure that we're figuring out specifically what that client wants to talk about. Right. So at the end of the day, if someone told me, well, my dog is the most important thing to me, or my bike is the most important thing to me, or my kids, or my house, or my job, or my collection of whiskey, or my collection of, glass figurines, like, frankly, I could care less what's most important to them, because my job is to help them protect it. And I know that if we follow the proper steps, or the steps associated with a proper or holistic financial plan, we're going to be able to protect no matter what it is that is important to them. So the important piece here, again, excuse me, is active language. You have to be in charge of your process. Now, active language doesn't mean aggressive language. There's a big difference between aggressive salespeople and active salespeople. Active salespeople tend to use language like, Kevin, so the next step in my process, working with every single client, is going to be exactly the same. No matter what we think your need is currently, we want to make sure that we walk you through each of the steps and in order to make sure that we cover off all of the areas. Okay, that's active language versus, well, Kevin, would you like to walk through the process with me? Because if you do, I'm more than happy to hold your hand as we do this, right? That's not increasing a probability of a relationship. Also, Sean mentioned, and I keep saying your name, Sean, so thanks so much for giving the example in the beginning. I always like having people I can lean on throughout the session. If you're going to move down the advice channel and you want to become more advice oriented as an advisor, you need to be able to use active language as you describe each of the steps of the cycle, because you find yourself selling the process, not the product. And I think that's something that, if you're going to write anything down, that's an important piece to remember. So more important pieces here are elevator speech. Now, for lack of a better way of putting it, elevator speech is something that you can link to an initial contact meeting, because we're not out in the world meeting people the way we used to. And I know a lot of people hate this term elevator speech, but the reality is I'm only using it because it's another word for a value proposition. How can we start to decide or start to discuss or describe what we're trying to do here? And if we lean on the process and not the product, we're going to get a little bit further. We also, at this point, have to remember that we are human beings who have ever had a conversation with somebody else. I used to run these sessions around initial contact a lot, and I found that the moment we give people information, no matter what the tenure is, they automatically forget that they've ever had an organic conversation with another human being. It's just something that naturally happens because we have something amazing now that we want to sell people because they need it in order to enhance their life. Well, we have to sometimes remind ourselves that we are humans who have had conversations. And by having organic conversations with the people on the other end of the phone, we're going to increase our probability of moving forward in this relationship, which you're going to hear me say quite a lot over the course of this, this presentation here. Okay, so make sure we're delivering on the promise. Now, we're not actually at the point where we're delivering yet, but we are going to make some promises here in the contact stage. Believe it or not, I've heard hundreds and hundreds of advisors make promises and never follow through. So if you're going to say something here in the initial stages or the contact stage, you have to make sure you're delivering on it. And that's why I say lean on the process, not on the product, because if you make promises early on that are actually something you can deliver on, you're going to increase that probability of having a long-term relationship. The discovery stage. This is my favorite part of the whole process because we've gone past the contact piece. We've now started to remove the barriers that are going to hopefully increase that probability of a relationship. But we have some work to do here. And if I could tell you, having worked with I've said this before, hundreds of advisors, the piece that's missing the most is the discovery process. It is the qualification interview. A lot of people tend to skip over this. They go from contact into fact find and then fact find to recommendation. Personally, I think it's a mistake because at this point, you're not talking about the need, you're asking about the want. You're trying to figure out on a very high level or getting a general overview of the importance of what people want to protect. And that's why I aligned my initial speech to this next piece, which was, I'm interested in figuring out what's important to you. That's the business I'm in. And unless you tell me specifically what is important to you, I'm never going to know. So I'm then going to make a recommendation based on facts and figures. Well, if I make it based on facts and figures alone, that doesn't give me the whole picture. So we have to start with relationship. The qualification interview, as I mentioned, is a general overview of what's important to that person. So you're going to ask questions that help them describe or really start thinking about the things that give them that weird feeling inside when you talk about it. Like, you know, the hard question of what would happen if someone in your family were to get sick and couldn't work tomorrow. Those are questions that cause the blood pressure to go up a little bit, especially in a person that doesn't have proper protection in place. And that's what we're only talking about insurance on this front, but it could be from the investment side of things too. If you're talking to someone who's 55 years old and they have not or do not have a plan for retirement, that is going to send them the blood pressure a little bit higher, because now they're going to have to start putting themselves in a position that may not be as comfortable as it would have been if they started in their 20s. Now, we know that this happens. We run into this in many scenarios. So really, we have to start asking questions that are meaningful to people. And as I mentioned, this is, in my opinion, probably the most important step, because at this point, you will get to ask if they are willing to go to the next step in the relationship. Okay. If they say yes, then you are now given the thumbs up to start looking at the facts and figures. So quick question to the group. Do you have tools that you can use currently that will help you with the qualification questions, the more right brain questions that are more around thoughts and feelings? Do you have tools like that that you can get your hands on or use on a regular basis?
Kathleen here. I'll interject. With Hub Financial, we do offer, we offer courses and coaching for the sales process, but part of one of the courses, methods specifically, we have what's called a simple conversation. So it is a questionnaire with a lot of more soft questions. And we have a guide to that questionnaire as well. And it's a paper-based PDF fillable, and we now have it electronically through a technology called Advisor Flow. And really that simple conversation starts, and it kind of leads from contact to discovery. The scripting that we have is, when you're presenting this questionnaire, is the most effective way for me to show you the services I offer and for me to get to better get a better idea of what you would like to discuss further is to have you complete this short document. It should only take a few minutes. So again, you're setting that time stamp in there. And should there be any questions here that you are not comfortable with, please feel free to disregard them. So it is a tool that Hub can provide to the advisors to help with that discovery process.
Love it. Perfect. Thank you, Kathleen. And it's nice to hear your voice. I've seen your emails, but this is the first time I'm hearing you. So thank you so much. Are people using this? That's the big question. I love that you have the tool available, and I love the script because the script is focused on the importance of the client driving this process and the advisor being there to help them move their way through. So are people using this to the group? Are you using the tool? And I can't see you, so you may have to say yes or no.
We do have advisors that use it. We actually can even customize it with their own logo. But again, to the group, is anyone on online using the Simple Conversation or their own version of the Simple Conversation?
So I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here. I'm going to say that silence normally means, in my experience, is that maybe not as many people are using it as they maybe should be. Now, having said that, I'm not here to judge anybody, but the reality is, if you're not using it currently, you should think about it. And again, I'm not here to tell you what to do. You're running your own business, but the importance of, and I love the title, Simple Conversation, because that's what it is, really. It's a conversation that is heavily focused on the right brain type of question. It is a question that tugs at the heartstrings generally, and I'm making assumptions based on what you said, Kathleen, but that's the idea of the qualification interview. It's really to get comfortable with the person. It's to get that person comfortable with your process. And if you begin to establish a relationship from a right brain perspective or a heart focused perspective, you're increasing your probability of going to the next stage. So I love that you have that tool, because there are some companies that don't have the tool and they allow advisors, it's poor language on my part, but they allow advisors to build their own. And frankly, as an advisor, you shouldn't necessarily have to build your own. If you're aligned with a company, there are lots of companies who have this option. So I'm glad that Hub does have that option as well.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and the Simple Conversation just reinforces, like, it's regardless of the answers, you just want to paraphrase and re-ask these questions back, right? And then
Exactly.
open further discussion by asking them follow-up probing questions to those, right?
Exactly. And you've hit the nail on the head. The priority conversation is one of the most important pieces as you move forward. It's not about the questions. It is definitely about what it looks like as you move forward. So perfect. Nice. Thank you for adding that, Kathleen. So we will move on to the next stage here, because we've got a few more to get through, and we will, don't believe it or not. So identifying opportunities. Now, this is where we really start to take what we learned in the Simple Conversation section, or the qualification interview, or the discovery portion, and we start to now take those priorities and align them with facts and figures. So we're going to start asking the clients about things like their mortgage amounts, or what their income is, or if they have life insurance, or if they have any debts, or they have any savings, or whatever the case may be. So we're really starting to get an understanding of what their financial situation looks like, or more importantly, their overall situation from an actual practice perspective. So this could be, again, using software, using paper. I'm a big proponent of the software side of things because, at the end of the day, the software is going to be responsible for the number, not you. I think as well, shifting the responsibility to software is going to protect you a little bit more as an advisor, because if you're left to crunch the numbers and come up with a recommendation, it's possible that you could miss something. I mean, we are human beings after all. So if we do miss something, that's going to maybe decrease the probability of continuing to be able to build a relationship with the person, especially if they figure it out and say, hey, that's not specifically something we've talked about, or that doesn't really align with what I would expect. So if you can, or you have software that you can use, definitely lean on it. Now, a lot of people, this is where I get a little bit of argument coming back around identifying opportunities using software. One thing we ran into, and I've run into across industries, is when we use software, people feel like you kind of become disconnected from the client just because there's a computer in front of you. Or now in our current environment, it's, you know, we're more distant. So if we implement some software, start using software to do this, we may run into some problems. So at the end of the day, though, if we do have an opportunity to use the software, you should, as I mentioned. If you walk into a bank anywhere, you never get the option of whether or not you want to use a paper-based product or a computer-based product. It's just part of the process. So you walk in, you sit down in front of the advisor, and they start typing things into the computer, right? Not once have I ever asked, would you mind putting this on paper for me? Or would you, because what they do is they actually give you a printout of it anyway. And a lot of cases, you have the option of doing that as well. Once the plan is created, you can give it to the client in a paper version so that they can put it in a file and you can revisit it on a yearly basis or every 6 months, whatever you choose to do. So really, to sum up this step, it's about gathering the facts and figures to make sure that you can really take a look at the difference between the theory and the right brain stuff that you talked about in the qualification interview and how it's going to impact, or whether or not what they have currently in place is aligned with that discussion. So that's going to happen here in the identifying opportunities stage. All right, providing the solution. Now, again, this is where the rubber hits the road, hopefully, or getting close to it anyway. It's slightly hovering above the pavement. This recommendation stage is where we've gathered all the info from the discovery stage as well as the identifying opportunities stage, and they come together in a recommendation that makes sense for the client. Now, if you've done all of the steps thoroughly, it means that you've increased your probability of the person saying yes once you make the recommendation. Now, that doesn't always happen, as you know. Sometimes we work our way through all of these stages, we get to the recommendation and the client says, well, no, I'm going to have to think about it, or no, I'm not interested at this time. Now, if that happens, it means we're obviously, and I'm going to say something you already know, is we're running into an objection here. Now, having said that, the objection is likely a smokescreen objection. Okay, so it's not the true objection. It's just something to get you away from them for the moment, because there's something that happened throughout this process that may not be perfectly aligned with the recommendation or the solution that you're providing to them. So this is where we talk about open-ended questions and the importance of asking open-ended questions to really try to figure out what is happening. So if you know, if a client says, I'm not interested, what are some of the questions we may want to ask in order to try to overcome or figure out really what's going on here?
I think if they've used the, you know, the simple conversations, or I call it the feel finder type questionnaire, where, you know, you're getting to know someone, and again, what's important to them, what resonates with them, you can refer back to that. So if they're saying something's not for them, then you can point out, you know, I recommended this solution because, you know, we discussed that this was an important area for you. So tell me more about, you know, how we could meet that recommendation. You know, if they're saying something specific's not for them, maybe give them an open-ended question to explain to you how they plan to address that piece of the puzzle if this is not going to be for them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to ask questions. We have to figure out truly what is the sticking point. And if we can refer back to something that we did with them earlier, again, we're going to increase the probability of being able to overcome this objection. Now, as an advisor, being able to use open-ended questions will open up many, many different types of opportunities in this relationship, of course. But again, the idea of open-ended questions is to encourage conversation, not to have it closed down by a yes or a no. So as you gain more and more tenure in the industry, you know, you can find yourself saying, if someone says, I'm not interested, you will have the ability to say, well, Aaron, why aren't you interested? It's an incredibly powerful question, and it may seem a little bit bold, but the reality is if you can ask that direct question, it means that you've gone through the stages properly. It means that you've established some sort of relationship with the client, and you can really start going back to that feel finder and asking those direct questions that are open-ended, that will encourage the conversation so that you can continue moving the actual process forward. Now, one thing I'm going to caution you on here, and we're all guilty of this, is when we get an objection, we tend to really just jump into sales mode, which is let's talk about the features and benefits again and how they can really take care of the things that you need taken care of. Now, that's a huge mistake because we're actually decreasing the probability of someone saying yes, unless we're incredibly good salespeople, which we've all done, and we've all, pushed that product a little bit. The person has said yes. But this process is about relationship. It's not about selling a product. So if we take a step back once we get an objection and we really try to figure out what the true objection is, we'll be able to increase our probability of moving forward. Now, I see something here. So absolutely, I agree. You have missed something fundamental. That's coming from SR. Is that who's
Sean.
Sean, again, perfect. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, absolutely. You have definitely missed something fundamental. And what that means is you're going to have to take a couple steps back and really try to figure out what's going on here. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to keep moving forward. And we're at the close. We've done everything proper. They've said yes, let's say, but we haven't fully asked how this is going to go forward. So, you've made the recommendation. They've said, okay, it makes sense to me. What do we do now? This is where we now ask how, we ask if they are truly interested in having this implemented, and here are the steps that we're going to do as we move forward. Now, every company has a little bit of a different process here when it comes to the close, but really what I want to focus here again is the ask. It's asking the client to take the next step and implement the solution or the recommendation that you've provided. So just again, to go back to, if you've overcome an objection at the recommendation stage, but then you get to the close and you ask and there's another objection, you may have to again think about what one of those fundamental pieces is or are that you've missed, and you may have to take a couple of steps back. But being able to really lean on the power of open-ended questions will be able to assist you at this point as well. Okay.
One of the things, I'll just point back, so I had the copy of this book here and exactly what to say. Sorry, it's my filters blurry. I fill in Joe's, but if anybody on the line today would like a copy of this book, I after we did our session with him, I thought it was so powerful in some of the words that he uses that I'm happy to send you a copy. So just email me. One of the things he talks about is, the words we use, the power of the words that we use. And you may know that you've done this process effectively and you get to that close. And instead of saying, if you would like to engage in this process, or if you would like to be my client, using simple words such as when we take the next step forward, because now I'm assuming that I know that we've built this relationship. I'm feeling that we're on a good path here, and I'm just going to help you make that decision. And I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when we take that next step. And there's a lot of really simple things in there that you kind of go, yeah, that's a really good way to position that, because he talks about the human psychology where as humans, if we're given the option to go, I'll have to think about it, or maybe later, even if intuitively we want to say yes, we will opt to not make a decision. So it talks a lot about how we as advisors, you as advisors with your clients, we can use words. And I can say, so when you start to place your Par Whole Life business with Equitable Life, I look really forward to working with you, not if you decide to, right? And so there's a few little things in that book that I think are hugely powerful in keywords that we can change in conversations to move people to the decision that we're hoping for. So
I love that. It's It's so incredibly important to use active language as we move forward, and absolutely right. We've come this far together, right, Aaron? It's like now we're going to take this next step together, and I will be there to hold your hand as we move our way through. And Sean had mentioned too in the comments section that if we, essentially, and I'm summarizing or paraphrasing, but if we lean on the process and what the next steps look like, it's going to take the client away from the specific product and really talk about, again, the process and using that active language. So for the sake of time, we have 1 minute left. Aaron, is it okay if we go like a minute over or something like that? I see some
scheduled technically till 1:30, so
Okay.
not to say we need to go that long, but hopefully we can hang on.
Okay.
I regrettably need to sign off, guys, and I really apologize because I really enjoyed the session. But Aaron, I'll follow up with you if you could forward me a copy of the book. That'd be great.
Great. Yep, for sure. Thanks for joining.
I'll push out an email. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. All right, so now we're on to the ongoing support stage. Now, this is the most difficult part. So the rest of the cycle, easy peasy, right? Making sure we follow all those steps and have those conversations with the client. This is where you will really figure out if this person is interested in working with you long term, because the assumption is we should be connecting with clients once a year to review their plan, to talk about what the process looks like, to see if anything has changed. But, this doesn't always happen because it depends a lot on so many other factors, like how many people you have in your block of business. So if you're a single advisor with no assistant or no help or no sales associate or anything like that, and you have 600 people in your block of business, your likelihood of being able to review something with someone once a year is actually quite low. And I don't know anyone yet who's willing to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have to be realistic when it comes to these or outlining expectations for ongoing support. So as I mentioned here, this is the ongoing relationship building process. So to make sure that you're fully engaged with the client after the sale. So it ensures that you as the advisor know of any changes that may happen over time or anything that goes on inside the client's situation. So one of the things that I would recommend at this stage is asking the client what their expectations are for ongoing support. Because a lot of times, and just from experience, and I know Kevin and Aaron will attest to this as well, we make the assumption that people want once a year reviews. And to be honest with you, that doesn't sound exciting to me at all. As a client, like once a year review, what are you going to do? Tell me what policy I own? Right? Like I know that sounds kind of cheeky and a little bit, I don't know. But at the end of the day, like if we just offer a review to someone, they're less likely to say, yes, I would love to have a review. But you also may run into some conversations that say, well, I already know what I have. So like, what are we going to talk about? And I think at this point, it's really important to start asking the client, so Aaron, what are your expectations for our ongoing relationship? Do you expect that we connect once a year, or do you expect that we connect every 6 months? And what are some of the things that you'd like to talk about during that time? Now, Kathleen, I've seen you come off mute. Would you please add something, please? Yes.
Well, I was just going to interject to piggyback on the ask, because not only asking throughout, and Sean Ryan makes a point of this, asking for acceptance throughout this process, but it's asking for introductions too through this process. And if you have a process, you can say something like, very similar to the way I met you, I would like to meet others. Did you feel comfortable with this process? So you're not asking for a referral or an introduction to the product you sold or to the client situation. You're asking for a referral based on the process you just took that client through.
Yes, I love that. The focus on the process. Absolutely. That's an amazing way to really start not only continuing to establish or continuing to build the relationship with the client that's sitting in front of you, but people like them. Right. If you have an ideal client profile and they're sitting right in front of you, why wouldn't you ask for somebody else that may have some of the same similar type things? I love that. I ran into a client. Well, they didn't run into. I speak to him every week, but I have a client of mine who ran into that exact situation around the ask. It was, you know, I'm working with this couple, and I've known them because they live in the same small town as I do. I've known them for many years, and we're now starting to go down this really holistic planning process. And they have a sister that needs the same help. So should I wait for the entire process to be done before I ask for the referral, or should I do it a little bit earlier? And actually, Kathleen, I said the same thing. Absolutely not. You don't need to wait for the very end of this process, because the fact that your clients are now starting to really become involved in what you're trying to do with them means that they have pulled value from some part of this engagement process. And at that point, it was a perspective change. And to lean on what you said, Kathleen, he said, okay, then I will ask for that referral. And the referral is based around the process. It wasn't based around the product, because you're absolutely right. Product's going to be different for everybody. If you're able to really talk about the process and the importance of the relationship building process through a client engagement model, you will increase the probability of having great relationships with those people going forward. So you also have to ask questions like, what do you need when it comes to ongoing support? Right? A client may already have an understanding of what they need going forward. They may need to start looking at other types of services you offer, or other relationships that you have inside of your, and I'm going to use the word hub, because at the end of the day, you are the hub of that relationship. And if they keep you front of mind, it means that they're more likely to ask you to refer them to somebody else if there's a service that they need or something like that. So again, it's all about building the relationship to make sure that you are there fully to not only support the client in the planning process, or the financial process, or the product process, or the engagement process, but also everything else they have in life. I know a realtor who I can ask for anything. It doesn't matter. I can say, hey, I need this person, whatever the case may be, and he has a connection for that specific thing. So that's an important distinction to make when you start thinking about the other people that are inside of your network, because ultimately you want to become that person for the client that's sitting in front of you as well. Okay, so that is the end of the formal presentation. Again, today was about hopefully allowing you to think a little bit outside the box. Now, the good news is, and as Kathleen said earlier, you do have a process. There are tools that you can lean on as an advisor, which is phenomenal, because it means you don't have to create anything on your own. We have so many advisors across the industry, across companies, who really love to create things. But the reality is, you don't need to create things. When you're in an industry that's this robust, there are people all around you that offer the tools that you need. And if you're working with a company like Hub, who has these tools, I highly recommend that you use the tools available to you, so that you can really focus on the relationships that you're trying to build with the people that are sitting in front of you. And if you do that, you're, again, increasing your probability of having a great relationship with that person, and being able to continue building your business and stay in the business, because you have more and more people that are coming down coming out of that relationship, and making sure your funnel still stays full, that you have people in the contact stage, discovery stage, identifying opportunity stage, solution stage, close stage, and the ongoing support stage. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the group if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, anything you'd like to say. And, you know, if I don't get a chance to say this at the end, I appreciate being here today. And thank you so much for the interaction. And I really enjoy going through this process specifically. It's one of the things that I'm most passionate about when it comes to client interaction, really, you know, establishing those relationships with people that you're working with. So thank you.
I do have a quick question. I might have missed it at some point.
Yes.
But how many meetings do you recommend that advisors have to go through the entire processes? Is it just one, like, hour and a half, 2 hour long meeting? Do you suggest breaking it up? I'd just like to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, so every client, obviously, this is an obvious statement, but every client's going to have a little bit of a different need, of course, Julia. But at the end of the day, I would say I would never recommend that you go through all of this in one sitting. The client needs time to process what this looks like going forward. And, you know, I would definitely recommend that the discovery and the identifying opportunities be two separate meetings, because the discovery stage really has to sink in with somebody. Right. They need to walk away from the meeting and really think about the impact of what you're talking about with them. The things that are, you know, they'll be able to go back to their life and say, hey, you know what? Julia brought that up in the questionnaire, and I think really that's something that we should bring to the next meeting with the advisor. This is where I believe it really begins to solidify, because once the client makes the decision to go to the identifying opportunity stage with you and doing the fact find, they're in to a certain extent, right? Like they're ready to take the next step. If you try to cram everything into one meeting or even two meetings, it's really overwhelming for the client. And you're actually decreasing the probability of them saying yes at the end, because it's just way too much information. And we know if we give too much information to people, they're more likely to say, you know what, I'm interested, I'm not interested, or I need to think about this process a little bit more. That's the one we run up against all the time. So we need to be able to, you know, break it out just a little bit more so that the client can have some time to digest what the actual situation looks like.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I always think too, you know, sometimes clients come into this process not really even knowing what they want out of it. So a proper introduction to the process and what, you know, the direction it can go into, that could be in itself you just planting an early seed to get them thinking about, you know, what do you need? What do you want? I mean, I've seen it many times. Clients have done a great job of savings during their 60s. They're getting ready to retire, and they have given no thought to what they're going to do in retirement, how much income they need, you know, what the plan is. Are they going to have a clawback? Do we need to be doing income planning? And like you said, it can be very overwhelming. So I think we have to be conscious that, and you could run into a similar thing with really younger clients who really haven't given this whole thing much thought. I don't know what I'm here for other than I make money, and I probably should have some guidance around what to do with it and how to protect it, right? So I always say, I think a big part of the advisor role is planting seeds with clients to get them thinking about, you know, the kinds of things we know they should be thinking about, but maybe intuitively aren't doing that.
Our methods PowerPoint presentation starts exactly with that meeting agenda, and it says introduction to the method process. So introduction to my process, discuss your goals and objectives, establish your financial comfort level, allocate appropriately amongst risk management and wealth building. So you're setting that off right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. Well, if I don't know if we have, I know a few people had to hop off, but you know, we appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for organizing Hub Financial. Like I said, I'm happy to send those books out to any advisor who feels they would find value in that. So if you want to flip the advisors my email, most of them would have it. I'm happy to coordinate that as well. And thank you very much to Will and Kevin from Pine Tree Coaching for joining us today and sharing your expert insights.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having me. Us.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Erin.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
We'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys.
That was great.
Thanks.